There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Movie companies are going to look at her and they're going to say box office poison. And a lot of this is due to her behavior.
And Disney decided to hire the most insufferable girl boss narcissist that exists on Earth, who hates Snow White.
Have you ever watched a beloved fairy tale crumble under the weight of one actor's explosive rant? In a world where classic stories are constantly reimagined, few things are more jarring than seeing a Disney cornerstone face backlash. That's exactly what happened with the latest Snow White remake. Once hailed as a surefire hit powered by big budgets and modern twists, it morphed into a cautionary tale of how quickly public opinion can shift, and how one moment on social.
I'd say that this is one of Disney's biggest regrets ever.
Media can upend decades of carefully cultivated magic, but that was only the beginning. Not so long ago, the announcement that Rachel Zegler would lead a new era of Snow White ignited a spark in Hollywood. Studios and fans alike believed she could breathe fresh life into a character whose origins date back to 1937, a time when Disney was just beginning its reign as the titan of family entertainment. For a moment, that optimism was contagious.
Uniquely unlikable, but then it is actually a terrible film as well, so it's the double whammy.
Zegler, who had gained recognition for her singing talent and on-screen charisma, was seen as the perfect choice to bring a sweet yet modern presence to a timeless princess. Insiders buzzed about her potential. Known for her confident stage persona and ability to connect with younger audiences, Rachel seemed poised to usher in a renaissance for a fairy tale often criticized for its old-fashioned tropes. Some of the early concept art suggested a bolder, empowered Snow White, a princess for the modern age. And while many looked forward to seeing how Disney would adapt the story for new generations, a few skeptics wondered if the updates might step too far from tradition.
I checked, we've discussed it before, I checked Rotten Tomatoes, and the score is even lower than the last time we talked.
Little did anyone realize just how big that step would be. One rumor circulated that the film's creative team intended to make the prince a barely relevant character. Another rumor suggested the iconic dwarfs might be drastically reinvented or eliminated altogether, in favor of magical creatures.
They're remaking the movie, they just got rid of the dwarfs, okay?
Okay, but what do they call them?
Why would they get rid of the dwarfs?
The magical creatures.
At first, these rumors barely registered with the average fan. After all, Disney had a track record of successful live-action remakes. Most believed the studio knew exactly what it was doing. Yet under the surface, tension was brewing, and it was about to erupt spectacularly. When the original Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered in 1937, it wasn't merely a film. It was a cultural phenomenon. For many families, it represented their introduction to animation and the enchantment of big-screen fairy tales. Over decades, Snow White grew into a multi-generational staple, one that parents and children bonded over. Remaking such a cherished classic comes with steep expectations. Audiences don't just want crisp visuals or improved special effects. They crave the nostalgia and heart that defined the original. Yet each new adaptation has the challenge of updating old material for evolving sensibilities. Snow White, for instance, has often drawn criticism for elements that some see as outdated. Critics say the 1937 version depicts a passive heroine whose entire happiness hinges on romance. At first, viewers assumed Disney would delicately balance respect for tradition with modern flair. Maybe Snow White would have more agency while keeping the whimsical essence that made the original so lovable. But as the studio dropped hints of bigger, bolder changes, whispers of discontent started spreading. The rumored approach to dwarfs, the sidelining of the prince, and the rewriting of certain problematic storylines had some fans concerned that the new creators might be throwing out the charm in favor of forced modern messaging. Given the massive legacy at stake, tension rose higher with each new detail. People questioned whether the film was heading toward a triumphant revival or an identity crisis that would alienate devotees of the beloved original. Unfortunately, the latter turned out to be far closer to reality, and the meltdown that followed would cement this remake's place in cinematic infamy. Disney is no stranger to controversy. Nearly every live-action remake has faced its share of heated debate. Yet something about this Snow White project felt different. Early behind-the-scenes gossip spoke of a fractured vision. Some on the creative team allegedly wanted to preserve the film's timeless fairy tale spirit, while others pushed to retool almost every traditional element to appeal to modern audiences. One of the first big frictions concerned the dwarfs. A few people inside the production apparently believed that depicting 7 dwarfs might be insensitive, leading to talk of using CGI magical creatures instead, or making them cameo roles. Meanwhile, others argued that removing the dwarfs was effectively erasing an iconic part of the story, not to mention taking opportunities away from actors with dwarfism who rarely see roles this prominent. At the same time, rumors about the romantic plot twist started swirling. The prince, a fixture in the original, might barely appear, if at all. Some fans applauded the decision, seeing it as a way to highlight Snow White's personal growth, without focusing on romance. Others balked, pointing out that love and hope were integral to the very essence of the 1937 fairy tale. Then came the chatter around Rachel Zegler's public statements. She'd done interviews teasing that this version of Snow White would be more assertive and modern, but certain remarks sparked unease. In more than one appearance, she implied that elements of the old Snow White were creepy or outdated. Although some viewers appreciated the candor, others bristled at what sounded like mocking the original. This uneasy dynamic laid the groundwork for a major confrontation that was about to explode, one that no amount of studio damage control could contain. YouTube comments, Twitter threads, and Instagram posts all became the battleground for this intensifying drama. At first, it was mostly typical online chatter, fans analyzing set photos, dissecting rumored plot leaks, and complaining or praising the changes. But something changed when Rachel Zegler ramped up her social media presence. The actress, known for being candid, occasionally posted remarks that some found off-putting. She'd respond directly to critics, often with sarcasm or exasperation. For the most devoted loyalist of the original Snow White, her tone felt dismissive toward a cinematic treasure. Meanwhile, supporters rallied around her, praising her for championing a more empowered version of the iconic princess. This back and forth escalated, fueling a cycle of heightened expectations and deeper skepticism. By the time official trailers and promotional clips appeared, the controversies were already overshadowing the film's marketing campaign. The narrative had become less about the film's artistry and more about the tension. Did Rachel Zegler actually respect the original Snow White or not? Were the dwarfs truly gone? Was this movie discarding everything magical about the classic in favor of forced modern updates? Amid these growing questions, the stage was set for a single, dramatic moment that would define the entire remake. It arrived in the form of an impulsive Instagram live session that took the conversation to a new level, one from which there was no return. The phrase Instagram Live Meltdown might sound exaggerated, but that's precisely how viewers described Rachel Zegler's impassioned outburst. Late one evening, she appeared on livestream, visibly frustrated as she addressed the relentless wave of criticism. Her words cut deep and were anything but measured. She blasted critics for living in the past, openly took jabs at the 1937 film's tone, and seemed to dismiss anyone who dared question her take on the iconic character. Clips of the livestream spread across social media within minutes. Memes were born instantly. Some fans applauded her for standing up against what they saw as outdated, romanticized storylines. However, a much louder chorus expressed outrage, accusing her of arrogance and disrespect. Many couldn't believe that the lead actor of a Disney remake was effectively ridiculing the very film that had established Snow White as a cultural icon. That short, raw moment of emotion, perhaps fueled by exhaustion or frustration, became the defining snapshot of the production's unraveling. Instead of calming the waters or rallying supporters, Rachel's words seemed to pour gasoline on the fire. News outlets seized the meltdown as the perfect headline: Snow White Star Blast. Critics, fans revolt over Snow White's Instagram outburst, and so on. Suddenly, the meltdown overshadowed every other aspect of the movie. But that wasn't the whole story. Section 6. Shockwaves through Hollywood. In the aftermath of the meltdown, industry insiders scrambled to gauge the fallout. Early tracking data showed that advance ticket sales were uncharacteristically low for a major Disney release. Social media sentiment worsened by the day. Even the studio's robust marketing campaign, complete with billboards, talk show appearances, and merchandise, couldn't shift the conversation away from the meltdown. Reports emerged of rushed reshoots or last-ditch editing adjustments. Some speculated these were attempts to reinstate minor nods to the original film or soften the changes that had proven so controversial. Adding to the chaos, allegations of behind-the-scenes conflict started circulating. A rumor surfaced that a portion of the cast and crew felt frustrated by how Zegler had handled criticism, believing it tarnished the film's image beyond repair. Financial experts predicted that the production budget had ballooned due to rewrites, reshoots, and a marketing blitz. To break even, the film would now need to secure an enormous box office haul, one that seemed increasingly unlikely given the negative press. Each day brought fresh speculation about the meltdown's impact, with some calling Rachel box office poison, and others drawing parallels to past Hollywood fiascos, where an actor's public image sank a film's prospects. At the same time, defenders insisted the meltdown was overblown, pointing out that everything from sexism to entrenched nostalgia might be fueling the hate. Whatever the cause, one thing was crystal clear. The meltdown had become a phenomenon that overshadowed any serious discussion of the film's actual quality. Yet the real test lay in how the movie would fare once it hit theaters. Opening weekend arrived, and social media lit up with reports of half-empty theaters. Photos of vacant cinema seats started circulating, accompanied by captions like, "No one came to see Snow White today." Even though official numbers took a few days to finalize, the writing was on the wall. This was going to be an enormous box office flop. Critics tore into the film, citing a lack of emotional warmth, clumsy pacing, and ham-fisted attempts at modern messaging. Many singled out the dwarfs' reimagining, or near removal, as a huge mistake that robbed the movie of its heart. Even the set design and cinematography, which some praised, were overshadowed by the negative press swirling around. Rachel's meltdown. Longtime Disney aficionados felt alienated. They claimed that the production team had mocked or trivialized the foundational themes of Snow White: hope, kindness, and a fairy tale romance. Rather than carefully modernizing certain outdated elements, the new version had seemed to thumb its nose at everything that made the original special. Rachel Zegler herself became the epicenter of scorn, with detractors insisting she was the reason many fans stayed home. Countless memes and posts portrayed her as someone who had disrespected a beloved classic and then lashed out when faced with pushback. Whether fair or not, that perception took hold in the public consciousness. And what happened next would shock everyone. In the wake of the film's disastrous opening, stories of on-set stress and internal disagreement spilled into the press. While some of these accounts were undoubtedly exaggerated, they painted a picture of a divided production. According to one rumor, the meltdown triggered tense meetings at the highest levels of Disney. Executives were reportedly furious that the star had essentially scolded fans during a live broadcast, contributing to the film's toxic reputation. Other cast members distanced themselves from controversy by emphasizing their respect for the original or deflecting questions about the meltdown altogether. Production personnel who had once praised the movie's updated direction grew uncomfortably quiet. They seemed more concerned with damage control than defending the film's choices. In private, some crew members supposedly felt betrayed. They had poured their hearts into building lavish sets, designing costumes, and orchestrating complex production schedules. Now, with the meltdown overshadowing everything, many believed their hard work would never get the recognition it deserved. Instead of discussing the film's technical achievements, the public dissected that infamous live stream. Though unconfirmed, talk circulated that the meltdown might also sour future collaborations for Rachel Zegler. Some insiders speculated that major studios, fearful of courting controversy, might be reluctant to cast her in big-budget projects unless she publicly shifted her tone or demonstrated a commitment to bridging gaps with fans. Whether that theory holds true remains to be seen, but the meltdown had undoubtedly become a major blemish in her budding career. By now, the film's dire box office situation was no longer in doubt. Economists projected staggering losses in the hundreds of millions of dollars, cementing its status as one of the biggest flops in recent Disney history. While a handful of viewers lauded its ambition or praised certain performances, none of that praise could compete with the sheer scale of the meltdown-fueled backlash. When Hollywood sets out to remake a cherished tale like Snow White, it walks a thin line between innovation and reverence for what made the original so magical. Stray too far from the source, and you risk alienating a fan base that spans generations, disparage or mock that original in an emotional online tirade, and you threaten to sink the entire project before it has a chance to stand on its own merits. That's precisely the lesson we're left with in the wake of Rachel Zegler's infamous meltdown. No matter how skilled the cinematographers, costume designers, or special effects teams, once an actor's words turn combative toward the story's legacy, the narrative becomes about the controversy, not the film. Throw in changes that fundamentally alter characters and relationships fans hold dear, and you've got a recipe for disastrous financial returns. So, where does that leave Disney? Studios may need to think twice before greenlighting massive overhauls of legendary stories, and they'll almost certainly keep a closer eye on how their stars engage with fans online. As for Rachel Zegler, her career might recover if she takes on roles that harness her talent without igniting similar disputes, but the meltdown will doubtless follow her for years. In the end, the meltdown highlighted a stark reality: nostalgia is powerful. People can embrace evolution if they sense authenticity and respect for the original, but they recoil hard when they feel mocked or lectured about the stories they love. The new Snow White might have aimed to be progressive, but the meltdown convinced many that it was a direct insult to a timeless icon. And once the public turns against you, all the marketing money in the world can't bring them back. What's truly shocking is how quickly everything unraveled. One moment, this remake stood poised to charm a new generation. The next, it collapsed. Beneath a cloud of internet-fueled outrage and misguided attempts at modernization. If there's a lasting message here, it's that audiences have a voice, and they're not afraid to use it. Despite all the ambitions behind this reimagined Snow White, the meltdown will remain the story's defining legacy, a vivid reminder that even fairy tales aren't immune to controversy when the people behind them forget the magic that made them special in the first place.